Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who's on the stream tonight. We have Arl, great to see you. Trev69, great to see you. I see thumbnail and I hear Wibble. John O'Sullivan, great to see you. Susan, great to have you on. Chatty Rat, great to see you too. Katrina, great to have you on. And good evening from the Brexit Plague Island, where there is no queues outside the local petrol station because there is no petrol to queue for. Just lots of people using the forecourts to do U-turns. Very good. Gaza, great to see you. We also have Mama Baker, great to have you on. We also have Enzo the God, great to see you, Enzo. Hope you're fine. We have Lost in France. Hope you're not too lost. We have also Wa, great to see you. Thomas. Audrey, great to have you on. Hope you're well tonight. Great to see you. We also have Seago Guitarist, great to see you. Who else have we got on the stream tonight? We have Nico, great to see you, Nico. We're up to 215 viewers, that's amazing. Aaron, I have to go through everyone pretty quickly. FSM, great to see you. John, Inconsequential, great to see you. Suzanne, great to have you on. We also have Christopher, the Londoner. Dano, great to see you. Beer Wizard. Killer, great to have you on. Hope you're well. We also have Martin and so many more. Well, I have to go all the way down to the bottom because there's Dano as well, and Reagan Elite, Buxton, Just a Guy on a Bike. And welcome to everyone on the stream tonight. So I have to go way down to CGM. Great to see you. Ed as well. Great to see you, Ed. Hope you're all very well tonight. Sorry I can't say hello to everyone because we have 237 viewers, so that's pretty difficult. So, of course, we have the Tory Party conference. Good fellas following me. So we have the Tory Party conference, of course, this week. What a a mess. I was going to say something else, but better not. It's still a bit early in the evening. Remember, guys, you can remember to smash the like button as you come on. That helps the stream get some more people on. And you can also send a super chat, which I'll read out during the stream, of course. 80,000 subs, Max. Good work. Thanks so much for that. Lost in France. Yes, it hit 80,000 today. That was great news. And it's on 80,100 already. So that's great. Hopefully going to catch up with Phil. That's not the goal, but hopefully get to 100,000. That would be a huge milestone. Probably not by the end of the year, but I'm hoping sometime early next year. That would be wonderful. So thanks to everyone who helped get the channel up to 80,000 subscribers. It means that, you know, what I'm saying is resonating with people. A lot of people are concerned about what's happening, and I think this channel and other channels like it, not just this one and Phil, but there are many channels that are holding or attempting to hold the Tories to account, hold Boris Johnson in particular and other Brexiteers, because unfortunately in the media they get away with it. Now there are some exceptions like Channel 4, but generally, for example, when it comes to the BBC, they're afraid to hold Boris Johnson to account. And you have the odd occasion where Andrew Marr may say something, but it's really the odd occasion. It makes the news when Andrew Marr holds Boris Johnson to account, when it should be something he does on a daily basis. We have lots of new people on as well. Great to see all of you. Excuse me. Hope you're all very well this evening. Hope you all had a very good weekend. So let's start off, of course, with Brexit. There's so many things to cover tonight. We have this story. It's quite depressing, so it is. I hate to start off with something like this, but it has to be talked about. Hundreds of healthy pigs culled amid UK shortage of abattoir workers. The ironic thing about this as well is that while British farmers are killing their animals, pork is being imported from Poland and France. Turkeys, I think, are also being imported from the European Union because there aren't the staff to slaughter them and process them. So it's easier for supermarkets just to purchase them from abroad. Is that a Brexit benefit? I don't know. So the culling of healthy pigs has begun on British farms, with farmers forced to kill animals to make space and ensure the continued welfare of their livestock, amid an ongoing shortage of workers at slaughterhouses. Now, we've heard so much about the heavy goods vehicle driver shortage, and I'll get to that, of course, in a moment, but we hear very little about what's happening with other industries, hospitality, farming. They don't have enough staff. It goes on to say pig farmers have been warning for several weeks, that labour shortages at abattoirs have led to a backlog of as many as 120,000 pigs left stranded on farms long after they should have gone to slaughter. Because what happens is the pigs continue to grow and there isn't enough space for them, and it's creating welfare issues. The pigs are too big to move around. They should have been slaughtered at a younger age, but they're continuing to be fed and grow because there's no place to send them. The meat industry is one of the many sectors of the UK economy grappling with labour shortages linked to Brexit and the pandemic, while a lack of delivery workers and drivers has affected supply chains. About 600 pigs have been culled on farms across the country, according to Zoe Davis, the chief executive of the National Pig Association, who said that the culling had begun at a handful of farms. We've moved to stage 2, Davies said. Stage 1 was contingency planning and putting pigs in temporary accommodation. Stage 2, we have not got any more space and pigs are growing. There are more on farms than we can manage. Either we stop mating sows, which some farmers are doing, or we thin out pigs so that the welfare of those on farms is negatively impacted. We shouldn't have to be here, and we shouldn't be doing this at all. Animals ready for slaughter but stuck on farms require feeding and housing, causing financial difficulties for farmers, while meanwhile large pigs which are overdue for slaughter often grow about 1 kilo a day, becoming too large for slaughterhouses to handle. So what happens is, because they're not going to slaughter, the slaughterhouses reject them because they're too big. I've had grown men in tears on the phone just at the thought of having to contemplate killing healthy animals. We have to avoid welfare culling on farms, Davies said. Some farmers are understood to have culled piglets, while others have been bringing slaughtermen to their farms to kill larger animals which have grown too large to take to abattoirs. And as I said, the flip side of this is that pork is being imported from Europe. It goes on to say farmers are responsible for the safe and legal disposal of dead livestock, and it's against the law to bury or burn carcasses. Most animal carcasses are transported to rendering plants where they are cooked and dried into a process which results in products used for the manufacture of animal feed, pet food, biofuels, chemicals, and organic fertilizers. And of course there are shortages at these plants as well, because they generally would, of course, had foreign labour, and they don't have many workers either. Trade associations representing all areas of the UK's food chain have proposed a 1-year visa that would allow workers to be recruited for jobs such as heavy goods vehicle driver, butchers, chefs, and other food industry workers. Look, a 1-year visa would be better than the 3-month visa and kicked out at Christmas. But also a one-year visa may not be enough. We said this before. You have to go back to freedom of movement. If you want the workers to come in, you need to bring in freedom of movement once again. Now, of course, the Tories don't want to do that because, it would piss off the Brexiteers. It would piss off the racists as well, because that's what many people voted for, to stop the immigrants coming in. And now that the immigrants aren't coming in, they're realizing there are these problems. Now, I think a lot of these issues are affecting industry, and they're not trickling down to the general public. So if you ask the general public, are you happy with this embargo on immigrants coming in to do these jobs, those who voted for Brexit will probably say, yeah, I'm still happy with that, because they're not feeling the effects of it. What I'm extremely concerned about is how the NHS is going to handle this, because of course the NHS relies on many workers, and as we're getting closer to winter where there's more stress put on the NHS, how is it going to cope? Stop it. Brexit is fine. Everything is fine. People love 3-month visas. Christmas is saved. Huzzah. Well said, yes. I hear you, Richard Turner. They should just take them to Downing Street. This is the thing. You know, there was a protest at the beginning of the year. The fishing industry thrown under the bus by the Brexiteers. What did they do? They drove some lorries down to London, did a circle for a couple of hours, and then left. That was their protest. They need to go to France and see how French fishermen or French farmers protest, because unfortunately the British people don't know how to put on a protest. The French certainly know how to put on a protest, and you know, you have to disrupt. And this is where I have a bit of a disagreement with what's happening in the isolation protests that are taking place in Britain at the moment, where they're blocking the M25 or they're blocking normal roads. I don't agree. Look, I agree with the protests, but I think the tactics are wrong. You need to keep the public on your side, but you need to attack the core. You need to disrupt Parliament. You need to disrupt the people in charge, disrupt Boris Johnson. You know, protest outside his house, protest outside the homes of the Tory MPs. I think that would be a much better strategy than disrupting the flow of traffic for the public, because yes, you raise the issue, but you create enemies, and I think you want the public on your side. You know, if the public see you protesting outside Jacob Rees-Mogg's house, they'll probably, you know, clap for you. They'll encourage you, because this is someone who's in charge of policy. The average person on the street has very little impact, unfortunately, especially when it comes to first past the post. And I think you just create enemies of the public, and you don't want that. Once again, I'm not disagreeing with their protest, I'm disagreeing with the tactics. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. Did you see that Michael Gove today said the Tories will never let the union break up? Boris Johnson will not... Boris will never say yes to another referendum as Scottish independence looks less likely. Look, Boris Johnson... See, the problem with Boris Johnson trying to stop a second referendum is the more he tries to stop it, the more he'll encourage people to support independence. In a way, he can't, because if the Scottish government go to court and they get a ruling in favour of them having a referendum, it's very difficult for Boris Johnson to block that. He can try and do that, but the more he attempts to block something, the more he will encourage people to support Scottish independence, because the independence people will turn around and say, look, this is the reason we need to be independent, because the likes of Boris Johnson is stopping us from even having a referendum. He's not saying, you know, we're not allowed to become independent. He said we're not even allowed to have a referendum. And trying to stop a referendum, you know, a referendum doesn't guarantee that you will leave, because you have to win the referendum. So the attempt to stop a referendum makes it more likely that there will be a referendum. The problem is whether it will be legally binding or not. So I don't think it's in Boris Johnson's interest or the union's interest to try and block a referendum. Thanks for that super chat. Number 3, we have, thanks for that super chat as well. Retesting on animals may also be required for certification purposes. All Shorts brought up this as well, and this is really depressing for me personally, because we've done, you know, so many organizations over the last number of decades have worked to end animal testing. There's so much animal testing, whether you agree with it or not, but you have to agree that a lot of it is nonsensical for cosmetics, for example. And we're going to see now, of course, it's going to be brought back because the UK wants to have its own standard. And in order to have its own standard, animal testing will need to be carried out. Completely, ridiculous and backwards, and a real step backwards, because these are battles that were fought and won, and we had moved forward from this, and we have developed new technologies, to deal with chemicals and how to test them in a way without testing them on animals or on humans. Thanks for that, number 3. Anyway, let's move on. So here's something, just something a little bit lighter than the previous story. So Boris Johnson, Boris Johnson said, okay, what we're going to do is let's take a step back. So at the beginning of this crisis a few months ago, Boris Johnson said, look, we don't need to bring people in from abroad, because we're going to train up British people to do jobs like, heavy goods vehicle drivers. And, there's no need to rely on foreign workers. But that didn't fix the problem because that wasn't a solution. The solution was not, we're going to just hire British people, because obviously there aren't enough British people to do these jobs. These jobs require training. Even if you try to make the tests easier, people still have to pass the tests. And the job itself as a heavy goods vehicle driver is not that glamorous. A lot of people who are drivers at the moment are leaving the industry out of stress because the pay is not very good. The style, the lifestyle is not something that many people want to have. Not many people want to do this type of job. So the response from the Tories was, okay, we're not going to hire people from abroad. What we're going to do is we're going to just hire British people. And then, of course, that didn't work. So the solution eventually was, okay, we're going to hire people from abroad, but we're going to limit the number of visas. 5,000 visas, 5,000 drivers from the European Union or from abroad who are going to drive. Okay, and it's just for 3 months. So it turns out there were 27 applications, not 27,000 or 2,700, no, 27. Boris Johnson even had to lie about this, where he said it was 127. Schwartz, thanks so much for that super chat. 80,000, yay! Thanks so much for that, very kind of you. Yeah, so those who don't know, the channel hit 80,000 today, or this morning, I think it was. That's great news. Really happy with that. Never thought that the channel would arrive at that stage, arrive at that number. Hopefully, by early next year, it will hit 100,000. Fingers crossed. And then, of course, I'll have to do something special for 100,000. But maybe I'll also do something special for... I didn't have anything actually planned for 80,000 because it was stuck at 70-something thousand for a while, and then I didn't know when it would actually hit 80,000. And then in the last few days, it just did there was a massive surge, and it went straight up to 80,000 really quickly. So I hadn't done anything planned. I was caught off guard. But I definitely will do something maybe for 90,000 or for 100,000, definitely. Thanks so much for that super chat. So I just want to read this story from the BBC. It says fuel stocks in South and London behind rest of the UK. So fuel supplies of petrol stations in London and the southeast of England are improving, but still remain behind the rest of the country, retailers say. Of course, Boris Johnson had said at the Tory party conference, don't worry, everything has been resolved. The crisis is over. Obviously, that's not true. It's almost like when Boris Johnson says something, then you know the opposite is true. The Petrol Retailers Association said 64% of forecourts and those in those areas had both types of fuel, compared to 86% of sites nationally. Supplies have increased in recent days after the military was deployed. Remember when we raised issues like this in the past, we'd say, look, there may be shortages, and the response from Brexiteers were Project Fear, scaremongering. Stop scaremongering. Stop with your Project Fear. Everything will be fine. Britain will be better off outside the European Union. The European Union will be collapsing. The European Union will be banging on the door asking, please come back, we need you. Yes. The government is offering 300 short-term visas to overseas lorry drivers. Boris Johnson said 127 foreign drivers had applied for visas aimed at tackling shortages. However, the Department of Business said only 27 had been identified. It is not confirmed what Mr. Johnson's number was referring to. I can tell you which number Boris Johnson was referring to. It's the one that he pulled out of his behind. The Times reported that just 27 people from the European Union have applied to be tanker drivers. Now, this is not the 100,000 heavy goods vehicle drivers, but it's not very good, is it? 5,000 heavy goods vehicle driver requests were made, and we just seem to have 27. The PRA, which represents independent forecourts across the UK, said steady deliveries and stabilising demand had led to improvements in stocks across the country. Gordon Balmer, PRA Executive Director, said 15% of sites in London and the southeast of England still had no fuel, down from 20% on Monday. Stuart, thanks so much for that super chat. Breaking, Boris Johnson says he won't agree to turkeys having a vote for Christmas. Unusual, since he likes a gobble. I love it. That's fantastic, Stuart. I asked a question on Twitter today, and I said, would rolling blackouts be enough to convince Brexiteers that maybe things are not going very well? And then I thought, maybe not. They just say, yeah, we'll just go back to candles, or yeah, I watch too much TV anyway, so it will force me to leave the house and go for a walk, or read a book by candlelight or something. I'm just trying to think at what state. That's why I'd love to speak with a Brexiteer, and I'd love to ask a Brexiteer, what would be necessary to convince you that Brexit was a mistake? That's what I'd love to hear, because I can guarantee if you had asked this question 2 years ago, they'd say, oh, well, if there were fuel shortages, then I'd say that Brexit was a mistake. And then now there are fuel shortages, and say, no, that's nothing to do with Brexit. Or it's the price to pay for freedom, or for liberty, or for sovereignty, or whatever it was. They'll always change the goalposts. So it would be great to go back in time and ask them, in 2007, 2008, 2017, 18 or 19, what would be a bad Brexit for you? What would be necessary to convince you that Brexit was a mistake? Of course, some of them will be honest and say, no, I'll never consider it a mistake. I don't care what happens. We can go back to the Stone Age and I'd still be happy with it. Nationally, the percentage of dry sites increased from 8% to 11% on Tuesday, the PRA said. Members are reporting that they're now receiving deliveries from military drivers using commercial tankers. However, further action must be taken to address the need of disproportionately affected areas. Besides fuel drivers, the government is offering a further 4,700 temporary visas in total for foreign food lorry drivers, which will last from late October to the end of February, in an attempt to avoid other supply chain issues. It is not yet known how many people have applied to this scheme. Probably not. What is the government offering? They're saying, please come over, we need you, but make sure to leave, after a couple of months. People would like to the Flintstones. If you want somebody, and you have to welcome them first. You have to say, look, we would like you to come over, and we would welcome your help. Um, you can't just say, yeah, come over, and then bugger off after a few months. That's not going to encourage people to stay. Now, maybe that is part of the plan. I've said this before. I don't think the objective is to get European drivers over. I think the objective is to get drivers from maybe parts of Africa, South America, Asia. People who just want to make a significant amount of money in a short amount of time. Because if you look at some of the wages, for example, I was speaking to somebody about it in Nigeria. They earn about £3,500 a year. If they could make that money in a month, they would be extremely happy. Double that, triple that in a month, they would be extremely happy. And they could go back home after that 3 months and stay, without work for a year or two, knowing and live quite comfortably. So I think this is the objective, not so much getting EU drivers back. But it takes time to get these. You have to advertise. You have to reach out. They're not going to just flood the market. And we're not seeing a huge number of applications at the moment. So even the people who perhaps the government is targeting are not arriving. Sorry, let me read some of your comments on the chat. No turkeys, let them eat corn. I love corn. I miss corn. Used to get corn here in Italy. It's a UK product, but now you can't get it anymore. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of Brexit. Please come over. We'll treat you badly, and we'll look for the first opportunity to launch you. Yes. Let me see. Russia is manipulating gas prices to force the EU concessions on energy security, Ukraine has warned. I think there's so many things happening behind the scenes, especially when it comes to Russia, that we tend to focus on, just gas prices or petrol prices, and not what's happening behind the scenes. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Now, Max, I've just joined the stream. I want to say the following. Whatever you're yammering on about is directly undermining the Good Friday Agreement. Don't ask questions, just nod along. Yes. No, that's true. Thanks so much for that super chat, Gareth. Reagan Elite, if they could buy slaves to drive the trucks, the government would do it. I've said before, I just want to add a little comment to what Gareth said, and then I'll come back to Reagan Elite's comment as well. What's happening with the Good Friday Agreement, I'm extremely concerned, because you have lunatics in charge like David Frost, who don't give a crap about the people of Northern Ireland, don't give a crap about the peace process, and he's in charge, along with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson doesn't give a crap about anyone but Boris Johnson. And I'm extremely concerned about peace in Northern Ireland, because remember, the people of Northern Ireland did not vote for Brexit. The people of Ireland didn't have a vote, and the European Union didn't want Brexit. The only people who wanted Brexit were the likes of Boris Johnson and the DUP in Northern Ireland and the Brexiteers in Great Britain. And the DUP don't care about the Good Friday Agreement. They didn't support it. And the Brexiteers in Britain don't give a crap about Northern Ireland. And they are in the driving seat. That's what's really concerning for me. You don't have people who are serious. You don't have people who actually care about peace or the people of Northern Ireland. And we have to listen to these people and try to take their concerns on board. Regan Alita, just about this is something, and I hope I'm wrong when I say this, but I have a terrible fear that there is. And we've seen comments about this recently on Twitter from a member of the Conservative Party Youth, or the Youth Conservatives, Young Conservatives, I don't remember, whatever the hell the name is. One saying that people on people on universal credit should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and should stop relying on welfare. This is the type of language you hear from the Republicans in the United States. And I've said before, and I truly hope I'm wrong when I say this, but I fear that universal credit is a step towards slavery. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here about this, but I'm afraid what's going to happen eventually is that people are going to be given a choice. We need people to pick fruit in the fields. We don't have any workers from abroad. There's nobody coming. We need people to pick fruit. We have all these people on universal credit. Let's force them out onto the fields. And if they don't like it, they get sanctioned or they lose their benefits. We've seen how people who are terminally ill been given the fitness, given the status of fit for work. So if you have this drive to get as many people off universal credit and into work as possible, and there are no jobs, or there are no jobs that pay a living wage, a reasonable salary, then of course you're going to have a situation where the farms need workers, and the state want to offload people into some sort of employment. And I see a situation where the farmers or the industry, whatever, are able to have these workers for free, basically, because they won't have to pay them any wages because they'll be on universal credit. So the state will be paying the wages, and the companies will be providing employment, and there will be an almost endless supply. And of course, the workers will not be able to unionize. They will not have any protections because they'll not be really workers. They'll be on universal credit. Now, I hope I'm wrong when I say this, but it is my fear, and I wouldn't put it past the Tories to do that. Thanks for that super chat, guys. We have another one from Tom Thorne. Thanks so much for that. Bojo promised the ERG he would ditch the protocol. Yes, this is something that one of the reasons it seems that the ERG and other Brexiteers supported Boris Johnson's oven-ready deal, which of course is the withdrawal agreement, which contains the protocol, is that he promised he would throw it in the bin as soon as he got, as soon as he won the election. He never planned to implement it. Now, I hope this is not the case, but it would explain a lot of things. Because why are the Tories so adamant about throwing the Northern Ireland Protocol away? Why are they always on about how we need to invoke Article 16? We need to replace the protocol. We need to renegotiate it, because they never supported it in the first place. But the flip side of that is the reason I don't believe. Look, I don't trust Boris Johnson, of course, but the reason I don't believe that Boris Johnson is going to tear up the withdrawal agreement is that he would have done it already. Now, there's also the response to that is he hasn't done it already is because he needs it as an excuse, as a distraction. But I think if there was the possibility just to tear up the protocol, he would have done it already. And he hasn't. So why hasn't he done it? There are many opportunities. But there was the possibility at the beginning of the year, as the crisis began, during the marching season, many opportunities for him to tear up the Northern Ireland Protocol, and he didn't. Now, he may be just dragging his feet here and hoping that this is more my line of thinking. I think what he's hoping is that Northern Ireland will eventually align with the rest of the Republic of Ireland when it comes to trade, and it will be too far gone at that stage for the unionists to do anything about it, and Boris Johnson can basically wash his hands of the situation. So look, We tried to invoke Article 16. We tried to protect Northern Ireland, but it's got to a stage where, well, look, businesses have adapted. Everything has sort of resolved itself. We don't even need to carry out checks because most of the goods are actually being imported from the EU, where there are no checks required. There's nothing really for us to do here. That's my impression. I think that's what he's hoping will eventually happen. And then it's taken off the table as a headache for Boris Johnson. Because once again, as I said at the beginning, Boris Johnson doesn't care about the people of Northern Ireland, so why should he care about the protocol? It means nothing to him. The French had guillotines for this nonsense. Yes. Frost said today he knew at the time, Max. This is about Frost. He says it was a wonderful deal, the best deal in the world, flawless, perfect deal. And now he's saying, yeah, it has some problems. Yeah, it has a lot of problems. Yes, it's not working. How can you go from something is perfect to something is not working in the space of 6 months? Even less than that. Because he hasn't been talking about invoking Article 16 recently. He's been talking about it for months. And you can't just turn around and say, yeah, we had a big problem with this all along. No, you agreed to it. As I said on numerous occasions, the EU never had a problem with the protocol. David Frost and Boris Johnson have a problem with the protocol. Anyway, so with the visas, a 12-month visa. Okay, we're going to change it from a 3-month visa to a 12-month visa. We're going to introduce new visas, but you need to bring people back into the country. You need to reintroduce freedom of movement, because there's no real incentive for people who want to live in the UK. Do you want people to return to the UK to work full time? To start a life in the UK where they can invest in the country? No, they don't want to do that. Is it because they don't want to piss off the racists, or is it because they're just incompetent? I don't know. I think they're so afraid of freedom of movement because it's probably the core of Brexit. They were able to convince the public, vote for us and we'll stop the immigrants. We've weaponized this issue and Brexit is the solution. And I think if they were to go back, I think this is all an attempt to avoid fully going back to the stage of freedom of movement. But if it may eventually come, because the situation has not improved and there aren't really any signs of it improving. And temporary visas of 3 months or 6 months or 1 year aren't really going to cut it. Because there's also the point that many people feel uncomfortable now living in the UK. Their employers, maybe, there were cases, and I've spoken to some people about it, how there were jokes in the office when the vote came in, to people from the EU, like, oh, now it's time for you to leave. Some of the jokes were intended to be taken seriously. Some of them maybe not so much, but there was a feeling that, yeah, now it's time for you to, we voted to kick you out and now it's time for you to go. And, how would anyone on the receiving end of that feel? Why would they want to return to a country where they felt unwanted, unwelcome? And of course, I'm not saying the general public are like that, but the political atmosphere is like that. And look at Priti Patel, for example. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. Do you think we will see Irish reunification in our lifetime? Yes, definitely in our lifetime. There were predictions before Brexit of 20, 30 years. Now that Brexit has happened, those dates have come forward a huge amount. We're talking maybe 5 or 10 years. I would say more 10 years, because I think there are a lot of things that have to fall into place before Irish reunification takes place. But a referendum, of course, would be the first step, and a referendum is going to take soon, pretty soon, I think. the referendum is the easy part. The reunification part is the more difficult one, and that's going to take time because there has to be the political aspect sorted out. I think it's important that the Unionists in Northern Ireland feel comfortable in a united Ireland. I think many of them would feel more in reality. They don't feel it now and they're concerned about it now. But I think many unionists would feel maybe more comfortable, definitely more comfortable as a British person in a united Ireland than many nationalists feel today as Irish people in Northern Ireland or as part of the UK. But identity, for me, identity is not so important, but for many people, identity is very, very important. And we have to acknowledge that, we have to respect that, and I think we have to create an atmosphere where people feel comfortable. I've said this before, that in the Republic of Ireland or any country around the world, we have our different communities. The perfect example probably is the Italian Americans in America. The Italian community went there and they maintained their traditions. They have their Columbus Day, they have their flags, they have their typical food, the music. Some of them, even Little Italy's continue to speak Italian and stuff like that, and they've maintained that part of their culture even though they're not in their country anymore. And I think, and you can apply this to almost any diaspora in any part of the world. They maintain part of their culture even though they're far away from their original home. And I think the same would be with the Unionists in United Ireland. They would have their flags, they would have their marches, but I think it would become less of a political statement and more of a cultural one. But that would take time. I hope I answered that question for you, DC. Thanks for that. But I definitely think it's going to happen. A referendum within probably 5 years, and then reunification. In whatever form, I don't know, but I'm thinking within 10 years. Nico, thanks so much for that super chat. Frost said that the issues came sooner than expected. Tells you he at least expected these issues. Yeah, so Frost knew what was coming down the road. Otherwise, he was an idiot. Because he was speaking to the EU, and of course the EU were saying, look, if you do this, this is the consequence. We know, because it's written here. This is what happens. If you leave the single market and the customs union, there's going to be these consequences. You're going to be treated like a third country. This is what happens to third countries. You're not going to be treated as some special case. And Frost, I'm sure, understood this, but he couldn't say it to the public because then he would undermine Brexit. And this is the huge difference between the European Union and the UK when it comes to Brexit. The European Union are happy to say the truth because they don't have anything to sell. They're not trying to lie to the public. They don't have some political game to play. The European Union is, as I've said before, is like a bureaucracy, or it's like a ministry. It's like the tax office or the motor insurance office. They don't have any axe to grind with anyone. They just exist to, of course there is the political aspect of it, but generally they create rules, and the rules have to be respected. There may be some exceptions, but they are few and far between. But when it came to Brexit, the European Union were not in the business of telling lies. They were in the business of telling the truth and saying this is what's going to happen. Because there's no benefit for the EU to lie, because they're not trying to sell something to someone. They're trying to warn the public about what's going to happen. And that's when, back in 2016, the European Union told member states, prepare for a hard Brexit. Not because they expected it, but because it was an insurance policy. If you prepare for a hard Brexit and it doesn't happen, at least you are prepared. But if you don't prepare for a hard Brexit, you're going to suffer the consequences. And what you had instead in the UK was, no, everything is going to be great. There won't be any food shortages or any heavy goods vehicle driver shortages, or there won't be any problems, we will be better off than the European Union. The European Union will collapse as soon as we leave. Countries and companies will be banging on our door the day after the vote to do trade deals with us, to do business with us, because either the Brexiteers were lying or they didn't understand reality. And maybe they had been drinking too much of their own Kool-Aid. I think that's probably part of the problem. We used to be an empire, remember? Of course, when we leave the European Union, we'll be an empire again. Some of the people believed it. Some of them knew that if I sell this, people will trust me, people will vote for me, people will give me money, which is probably more important. The Nigel Farages of this world and the Jacob Rees-Moggs. Thanks so much for that, Nico. Just read some more of your comments. 33,000 new cases today. And this is something, it's off the radar completely, but it's still, chugging away there in the background is the pandemic. And there's not much, we don't hear very much about it. Pile those bodies high. And Boris Johnson, of course, doesn't suffer the consequences of that either. That's what I'm trying to understand. Is Boris Johnson made of Teflon? At what stage will Boris Johnson be brought down? Because if somebody had said to you, there's going to be a pandemic and there are going to be 140,000 people dead, and Boris Johnson would be Prime Minister, I think many people would say, I don't think he'd be Prime Minister for much longer after that. And yes, he is. He's still Prime Minister. Peter, thanks so much for that super chat. Check out our law. Our day will come in Irish, yes. Thanks so much for that super chat. Let me just see in case I missed another one. Okay, let's move on. UK Brexit Minister Lord Frost warns Joe Biden to stay out of Northern Ireland talks. Yeah, because Joe Biden has no concern. It's none of his business, none of America's business if Boris Johnson and David Frost want to undermine peace in Northern Ireland. The UK's Brexit Minister has warned Joe Biden to stay out of Northern Ireland's Brexit talks. And I think this is once again playing to the crowd here. This is during the Tory party conference. Look, I'm pretty sure after he called, the US president's, Secretary of State or the Secretary of State or someone in his party perhaps, and said, look, I'm very sorry about what we said. We didn't mean any of it. It was just for show. Anyway, it goes on. Last month, Mr. Biden told Boris Johnson not to renege on treaties preventing a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, warning that the US had spent an enormous amount of time and effort on the peace process. But asked about Mr. Biden's stance on the issue at the Tory conference, Lord Frost said that the border question was for us to decide and sort out with the EU as we wish. The minister had earlier in the day threatened to invoke Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol Agreement, Northern Ireland Brexit Agreement, which would suspend key parts of the Brexit Treaty and could see a hard border emerge. No, not really, but okay. Asked what role Mr. Biden could play in the talks, Mr. Frost said at a fringe event, I think this is a negotiation between us and the European Union. Outsiders are kind of interested observers, but no more than that. Okay, you can say this, but it's not an observation of reality. You can say, yeah, Joe Biden has no business in what happens in Northern Ireland. Yeah, you can say that, and you can continue to say that, but there are consequences for ignoring the United States here. Is the United States taking part in the negotiations between the UK and the EU? Of course not. But what happens can have consequences for the UK if you want a trade deal eventually. Lord Frost, who personally negotiated the treaty he now wants to rewrite, added, I think Every country around the world that takes an interest thinks the Belfast Agreement is something very important and very worth protecting, and we agree with the Americans on that, as has been said many times. The more the context can be made helpful is in support of what we're trying to do, is to sustain the peace process at a time that's been undermined, the better. At a time that's been undermined, the better. I'm not sure what he means by that, but I think ultimately is for us to decide to sort out with the EU as we wish, and nobody should expect any different, really, I think. On September 22nd, Mr. Biden told media at the White House during a UK visit that he felt very strongly about the issue. We spent an enormous amount of time and effort in the United States. It was a major bipartisan effort made, he told the media, referring to President Bill Clinton's key role in the Northern Ireland peace process. I would not like it and I would not like at all to see, or I might add, would many of my Republican colleagues like to see, a change in the Irish Accords. The end result would have a closed border in Ireland. Okay, well, I talked about that before. Mr. Biden's election was a serious blow to Boris Johnson's Brexit ambitions, partly because the US president had made clear that he was willing to use diplomatic muscle on behalf of Ireland and the EU over the border issue. But the new Democratic administration is also significantly less interested in trade deals with the UK compared to the one led by Donald Trump, who viewed Brexit more positively. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss on Sunday appeared to concede to a US trade deal was unlikely anytime soon and suggested the UK would focus elsewhere. I think this is an attempt by Boris Johnson's government to appear tough and say, yeah, we're not going to listen to the Americans. We don't give a crap about what the Americans have to say. We're going to deal with Northern Ireland the way we see fit. But in reality, yes, you can say that, but there will be consequences if we're not talking about not just getting a trade deal, but there could be sanctions. If Northern Ireland is affected by Boris Johnson's narcissism, then there will be consequences for the UK. Joe Biden can impose sanctions. Joe Biden is still going to be there for another number of years, and if the Democrats win again, I'm thinking the policy will remain the same to protect peace in Northern Ireland, and anyone who attempts to undermine peace in Northern Ireland will suffer the consequences. I'm not talking about war or anything. I'm just talking about, direct sanctions on individuals, perhaps, or on individuals' interests. The US is very good at this, in the same way the European Union is very good at targeted sanctions. And we saw today that, well, I'm going to get to that in a moment, but there's a possibility that France could cut off power to the UK. Now, it's in regards to boats or to fishing, but it could also be used as a tool indirectly by the European Union in regards to Brexit. Would blackouts be a problem for Brexiteers? I think it would. I think, if there were rolling blackouts, Boris Johnson would be put under a significant amount of pressure. You can blame the EU for these blackouts or whatever, but it doesn't fix the problem. In the same way, you can blame the companies for not raising wages or whatever for heavy goods vehicle drivers, but it doesn't fix the problem. The US will take the UK to the WTO. True third country stuff, my God. At least Trump was an amusement maniac to have as a president at the end of civilization, as in fact the world. 560 watching, yay! Smash that like button, guys. Remember, you can support the stream or support the channel by hitting me with a super chat, and I'll read it out on the stream. And you can also become a Patreon if you like. You have access to Discord after the show. Okay, let's move on. Dominic Raab. It's going from bad to worse, it seems. Dominic Raab sparks row with conference pledge to end nonsense of Human Rights Act. Okay, Dominic Raab has vowed to end the nonsense of the Human Rights Act. Dominic Raab is nonsense, okay? Dominic Raab is an idiot who shouldn't be anywhere near power. He's not just a bad person, he's an absolute idiot as well. And I really don't understand how Dominic Raab is able to tie his shoes in the morning. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he wears slippers all the time. Claiming that the legislation is allowing dangerous criminals to escape justice. The government will overhaul the act before the next general election, the new Justice Secretary confirmed, although he stopped short of saying it would be repealed. So this sounds like maybe saber rattling once again. The Tories do this from time to time. They say, look at all these crimes taking place. We need to stop it, and we're going to introduce new legislation to punish people more severely. And then nothing happens, and then just before the election they say, yes, vote for us and we're going to end crime, we're going to get tough on crime. The Labour Party are not tough on crime, you need to vote for us, look at all these criminals, we've been in charge for 10-15 years or whatever at that stage, but you need to vote for us because there are too many criminals about. That's how it works. And the public, I'm sorry to say, not all of course, but many people are buy into this. They buy the rhetoric. Yeah, well, Keir Starmer is probably easy on crime. We don't want to. We need to vote in the party that's been in power for the last 10 or 15 years. At that stage, whenever the next election is, 10 years, let's say, we need to vote those people in because they're going to get tough on crime. I trust Boris Johnson being tough on crime. What has he done so far? Tried to stop people from protesting. Yes. Thon, thanks so much for that super chat. The problem with going back to the pure nation state is that there's no place for discussion. It's back to like before World War I, when they would talk via gunships. I don't. Yeah, thanks for that super chat. I truly hope we're not going to get to that stage where there's gunboat diplomacy. It doesn't. I think in this modern day, it doesn't really serve any purpose. It serves a political purpose, but more, instead of putting fear in your enemies, it's an attempt to rally the people of the country to your cause. Yeah, look how tough we are. But I think, that used to work a century or 2 centuries ago. It doesn't really work today because most of the public understand it's pointless. It's just jingoistic rubbish. It's not effective. The low information voters love it. Those who are, who get most of their information from the likes of the Express, they love this type of thing. Yeah, look at us sending over the Navy to teach, Johnny Foreigner a thing or two. That's what it plays to, and that's why it's there, and that's why it's used. But it doesn't actually change the situation. It doesn't actually improve the country's position. It actually probably makes it worse, because the other country looks at, this is what you're doing? We had an opinion of you, and now it's much lower than that. Thanks so much for that super chat. Just make sure I didn't miss one. Okay. So it goes on to say, big cheer. So, and I think when it comes to Dominic Raab and this is once again a case of, yeah, we're going to remove this horrible Human Rights Act, and then they won't do it because there will be sanctions from other countries. To big cheers, Mr. Raab attacked criminals using human rights laws, raising the alleged example of a drug dealer convicted of beating his ex-partner. A man who hadn't paid maintenance for his daughter, then successfully claimed the right to family life and avoid deportation, he told the conference. This is what they do. This is what they do if they're attempting to change the law. And it's not just the Tories, many politicians do this. They will take one example and expand it out, and they will use that example to change the law or to repeal a law or to create a new law. But you don't create laws based on examples. You have to create them unprecedented, or you have to create them in a way that affects the public. You can't just have it as you can't just cherry pick an example and say, okay, we're going to force this law through based on this this hypothetical or this example, anecdotal as well. Sorry, somebody's making noise above me. It is absolutely perverse that somebody guilty of a domestic abuse could claim, Boris Johnson, could claim the right to family life to trump the public's interest in deporting him from this country. Wasn't Boris Johnson involved in some sort of... maybe I better be careful what I say. I just heard something. There was allegedly Boris Johnson was involved in some sort of domestic abuse, allegedly. The example he said is about 5 years old and total lie. It's been in the past at conference. So it's been used, so it's recycled. So the Tories believe in recycling. That's good to know. Yeah, Max, look at how we've improved our standings. Chinese threatened Taiwan and Russia, sailing destroyers up the channel. We've been a third country with third country power. Yeah, is it like the Russians sending naval vessels along the channel, and like, shouldn't you say something about that? Shouldn't you be stopped? But then, of course, the Tories don't want to take on Putin and the Russians because they would lose money. You don't take on your donors. We've got to bring this nonsense to an end before the next election. We will overhaul the Human Rights Act, the end of this kind of abuse, and restore some common sense to our justice system. I think this is just another attempt to use something in order to convince the public. Red meat to the base, basically. We're going to get tough on crime, and vote for us, we'll get tough on crime, and then just repeat the same mantra at the next election as well. Don't actually do something, because if you do something, then you actually can't use it again. So just don't do anything and pretend to act tough. That's the Tories to a T. So I want to show you this. I was asked to discuss this, to talk about this. This was very interesting. So disability campaigner Dominic Hutchins confronts Jacob Rees-Mogg in streets outside Conservative Party conference. Now, let me start off by saying Jacob Rees-Mogg would not have responded to this man if there was not a camera present. Because there was a camera present, Jacob Rees-Mogg was forced to reply. Johan, thanks so much for that super chat. Could the reason for Brexit be the lack of education in foreign languages? When I read the Daily Express or the Sun, I feel transported to a different world. Well, I definitely believe, travel broadens the mind. And something I've greatly appreciated with travel is when you travel abroad, you see the positives, but also the negatives of the country that you're visiting, but also the positives and negatives of your own home country. So I'm originally from Ireland, and when I first came to Italy, I saw the positives and the negatives of Italy, but also the positives and negatives of Ireland. And I was able to, and I thought to myself, why can't we copy the positives and take them back? There are so many countries around the world. They have the good aspects and bad aspects. And I think when you travel, you start to open your mind somewhat and understand, yes, these are things that we should have in our country. These are things we shouldn't have. And unfortunately, many of the people I believe who voted for, not all of them, but many of the people who voted for Brexit probably had never travelled, not so much outside Britain, but never travelled maybe from outside their own town or village. Definitely never visited Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland or other parts of the UK. And I'm using Scotland and Wales particularly because Scotland voted to remain. Northern Ireland voted to remain. Wales generally voted to remain, but it was the vote went to leave. But there is a strong feeling now that if there was a vote held today, Wales would vote to remain. But I think, yes, you're right that, and of course, if you learn a foreign language, you also learn the cultural aspect of that, because culture has a huge impact on language. And if I think if there was a greater understanding of languages, a greater learning of languages in schools in Britain, perhaps people would have had a different view of the European Union. Thanks so much for that super chat. We also have one from Mike Higgins. Thanks so much for that. Boris is involved in domestic abuse. A few of the GB problems affect the rest of the world. Yes. Thanks so much for that super chat, Mike. In a sense, it's a type of domestic abuse. Yes, domestic as in damaging the country. So it took me a moment to realise that. Go grinning menacingly at a YouTuber asking for the £20 universal theft. Anthony C, thanks so much for that super chat. God bless BBC presenter Nick Robinson for ordering Boris Johnson to stop to talking so much about so there can be a conversation. Yes, didn't he say to Boris Johnson, stop talking? I haven't seen that. I just read about it. I haven't seen the video, but I must check it out. Thanks for that, Anthony C and Mike. Ministerian, thanks so much for that. They visited Spain, which was part of the Greater Gamony, a province of the UK. Yeah. The caveat, of course, is if you're traveling abroad, please don't go to a place where you find your compatriots. Ibiza is not is not Spain. No, I'm joking. But yes, we've seen the documentaries and we've seen the TV shows from the 90s of not just British people, okay, my own Irish people, my own compatriots as well, who would generally go to places. Look, I'll go to the place because there's the sun and they speak English and they feed me food I find at home. But I think that's changing. I hope that's changing. People's minds are opening up. Thanks so much for that, Ministerian, too. So it says here the disability activist has berated Jacob Rees-Mogg on a Manchester street, accusing the senior Tory of being just another Eton millionaire who looks down on disabled people. I'm less concerned with how Jacob Rees-Mogg interacts with people and more how he votes, because Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and others who went to Eton, their voting record demonstrates that they have nothing but contempt for people with disabilities. I've said before there was, and I've covered it on numerous occasions, how almost every Tory voted against increasing benefits to people who are unable to work because of a disability. So in line with prices, in line with inflation. So it wasn't just we'll increase their benefits because they along with inflation. No, they were against that. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of them. He voted against increasing welfare for people on disability in line with prices. It's not about, we're going to give them, a UBI or something. He was against increasing it in line with prices. What's his justification for that? Oh, we have to look after, businesses. We can't be giving these people too much money. Iskander Boris, Iskander, thanks so much for that super chat. The Tories have no ideology or plan. Sorry, Peter Hitchens was right when he called the Tories an organisation for obtaining office for the sons of gentlemen. I don't always agree with Peter Hitchens, but when it comes to the Tories, I agree with him 100%. He knows what the Tories are, and he's not afraid to call them out. He knows exactly what they're made of. He has a particular insight, I think. And you're right. Yeah, they don't have an ideology or a plan. It's about protecting their children or their grandchildren, or making sure that their those who inherit will be protected, because it's about protecting themselves, protecting their own. And if you're not part of them, if you're not part of their club, they don't like you. They won't protect you. They'll try and force you out. For example, John Major. John Major, his I think his father drove a bus. He was a bus driver or a shopkeeper. I think he was a bus driver. And Jacob Rees-Mogg hated John Major because he didn't come from money. He wasn't a true Tory in Jacob Rees-Mogg's eyes. Because for Jacob Rees-Mogg, if you inherited millions of pounds, then you're a good person. If you're poor and you haven't inherited anything, then you just deserve contempt. You're a second-class citizen. You don't deserve to exist, in a sense. And I'm not afraid to say that, because that's how they vote. They would prefer that people on disabilities, there's whatever they're going through gets worse and worse, to give them less and less money, and it is less and less money, because as prices go up, as inflation eats into whatever they have, their portion of cash gets smaller and smaller every year. They get less and less money. They become more and more desperate, and the Tories continue to vote for that. As I said before, ignore what they say and look at their voting record. Thanks for that, Iskander. Alexis, thanks so much for that. Shall we start a crowdfunder for Dominic Hutchins? Definitely, yes. I'll definitely look into that. I'd love to speak with him as well, to promote his cause. Thanks for that suggestion. Yeah, I'll have a look with the admins about doing something like that. I don't know his situation, so I have to be very careful, because if he's on universal credit or disability payments, I know there are concerns that you can't receive money, and but we could look into something like that. Definitely like to help him out. So it says here, Dominic Hammond's sorry, I'm a bit confused tonight. Dominic Hutchins, who has cerebral palsy, challenged the Commons leader on the government's track record on disability rights outside the Conservative Party conference on Monday afternoon. The campaigner took the minister to task over policies that he blames for causing the loss of his job as a youth worker, and saw him undergo a humiliating test to prove his disability. This feeds back into this thing of we need to test people, and I've said before, universal basic income would eliminate all of this. Everyone gets it. You don't have to jump through hoops. You don't have to prove that you're disabled. Someone I know very well had he had problems with his back, and he had to prove to the agency where he was getting his universal credit that he had back problems. Even though he was walking with a cane, he had to prove it in some way. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. My mother was... Sorry, I'll go back up. My mother was one of those. Max lost her disability benefit despite being partially paralysed and suffering from a debilitating spinal condition. So sorry to hear that. How can you take someone's benefits away like that? And how do we fight this? How do we deal with this? How do we respond to this? I think the people who voted for Jacob Rees-Mogg, I'd like to ask them, are you happy with this? Do you think people who are on disability deserve to be punished more than they're already suffering? So Mr. Rees-Mogg calmly defended the government's approach as being there to support people, as he had stopped to talk to the 43-year-old member of the Disabled People Against Cuts group. But Mr. Hutchins told him, You're just another Eton millionaire Tory who looks down on disabled people. He accused the minister of talking rubbish and accused him of being shameful. I'm sorry you think I think that, but I wish you well in your search for a job, I really do, Mr. Mogg responded. Mr. Hutchins asked if he could speak to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson following the exchange. I'm sure he will know your point, Mr. Mogg replied. After their discussion, Mr. Hitchens explained why he challenged the minister. He said 3 years ago he had to undergo testing for his ability undergo testing to over his eligibility to receive personal independence payments, and to prove that I still have got a disability. There are a lot of disabled people who can't speak up, so I think it's very important that those who can do, because if I don't, nobody's going to. Dominic Hutchins said, I've been disabled since birth. He said it was very degrading, and it was very and so humiliating. Mr. Hutchins, who said he had a degree in youth work, also told the Tories responsible for losing his job in 2014 when cuts meant the government close all youth services. A parish councillor in his hometown of Dalesey in Cheshire, Mr. Hutchins ran for Labour but said he recently left the party because he felt Leader Keir Starmer isn't challenging the government enough regarding disability rights. Mr. Hutchins acknowledged that Mr. Rees-Mogg has stopped to talk to him rather than continue into the safety of the Tory conference. But I don't believe it will do any good. There are a lot of disabled people who can't speak up, so I think it's very important that those who can do, because if they don't, nobody's going to, Mr. Hutchins said. I still believe that Jacob Rees-Mogg responded and stopped because there was a camera there, not because he actually cares. But I think we need to put pressure on the people who vote for the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg. Who are these people? Why did they vote for him? The same way with Boris Johnson. Who the hell votes for Boris Johnson? Are you happy with what he's doing? Do you not understand there are consequences? Let me read some more of your comments. Totally mogged him off. I'm really impressed tonight with you guys taking the narrative into your own hands, confronting them with their own words, humiliating them with their facts, proving them wrong again and again. Why Tories say is global shortage. Why are the Tories saying there's a global shortage? Because they have to. There is a shortage of heavy goods vehicle drivers. In the UK it's 100,000. In Europe it's 400,000. But Europe has 600 million people. Britain has 60. So the impact is much greater. There aren't food shortages. There aren't fuel shortages in Europe at the moment. I don't know if things will change, but at the moment there aren't these problems. They're only happening in Britain. They're not happening in Northern Ireland, but they are happening in Great Britain, which obviously means it's down to Brexit. Or who voted for Iain Duncan Smith? I would really like to know. I'd love to have someone who voted for Iain Duncan Smith on the channel. So in regards to Mr. Hutchins, I'll speak with the admins about this, and maybe we can set up a GoFundMe or some sort of charity organization, or we can do some donations to him or something like that, to an organization that he works with, to help them out. Okay, let's move on. Whoops, not this one. So staying with Brexit, it says here, France threatens to cut UK and Jersey energy supply in fishing row. So French government pushing EU to take stronger stance in dispute over access to Channel waters. The EU could hit Britain and Jersey's energy supplies over the UK's failure to provide sufficient fishing licenses to French fishers, France's EU Affairs Minister has said. Clement Belloun, who is a close ally of the French President Emmanuel Macron, said action would be decided within days and discussions were already in motion. The French Prime Minister Jean Castex Castex echoed the sentiment, telling the National Assembly that the EU had to be firmer with the UK. The European Commission is moving. It must be done. It must it must do more. France has been consistently pushing the EU to take a stronger stance against the UK over its concessions that Boris Johnson's government is acting in breach of its obligations over fishing access to Channel waters. Last week, a third of French fishing boats applied to fish in Jersey waters were turned down by the island's government. The previous week, the UK government provided only 12 of 47 French vessels with permits for its coastal waters. The UK and Jersey authorities have said the vessels that had been turned down had failed to provide evidence of operating in the relevant waters. Baun said France would not stand for it. He said, enough already. We have an agreement negotiated by France, by Michel Barnier, and it should be applied 100%. It isn't being. In the next few days, I will talk with my European counterparts on the subject counterparts on this subject yesterday. So I talked with my European counterparts on the subject yesterday, and we will take measures at the European level or nationally to apply pressure on the UK. Johan, thanks so much for that super chat. I think the problem with heavy goods vehicle drivers has to do with cabotage rules. Yes, cabotage rules are a big problem for the short, because what happens is, so for those who don't know, cabotage allows drivers to, for example, if you're, just say you're coming from Spain, you could pick up something from Spain, another object from France, perhaps you arrive in the UK, you arrive in Great Britain, you drop it off in one destination in Britain, and then you could drop it off in another destination in Britain. And then what you do is on the return, the lorry would be empty or almost empty. You could pick up objects, pick up goods, maybe from Manchester or London or wherever, and deliver them to countries on the continent. That was how things operated before Brexit. And now you can't do that, so it's more expensive to operate as a haulage company. So it's becoming more and more expensive, and many haulage companies have decided, look, we're not just going to bother with the UK after all. It's not worth our while. So it's not just a case of not having the drivers, but many of the companies don't want to operate in the UK. And the UK companies would normally operate in Europe as well, and it's more expensive for them to operate too. They have to rely on the UK domestic market, which is a problem. So that's correct, Johan. Thanks so much for that super chat. Cabotage is gone, and it's not coming back for the foreseeable future. And it was very, very important for the haulage companies, both in the EU and the UK. Let me read some more of your comments. Get here as soon as you can, amigo. Big things are about to happen here. Okay. Mike, Jersey and Guernsey, French again. Blockades are an act of war. France could just demand Jersey to provide evidence that they needed the electricity in the past. Good for the goose. I don't think this is a good thing to do. I don't think it's a good idea to cut off power, because you're going to impact ordinary people, and many of these ordinary people have no dog in this fight or no skin in this race. They're not involved in the decision making either, but it would put pressure on those in charge. So the minister, whoever's in charge of Jersey, would come under a lot of pressure if there were blackouts. We rely on France for energy. We're not going to get the energy from the UK, from Britain, so it's going to be. They would give in pretty soon, I think. But of course, the response would be from the UK government is, yeah, we're going to send gunboats, which doesn't fix the problem. Okay, let's move on. Actually, we're about over halfway through the stream, so I want to have a light moment. We'll watch this funny video, and then we'll get back to the serious stuff in a moment too. Remember, guys, to smash that like button. So I can use this one.
The important thing is not to panic. There's no need to change your buying habits at all. Can you see that a government minister telling people not to panic is likely to lead to more people panicking? It worked with COVID. Did it? Oh yes, I suppose then we were trying to get them to panic. Tricky, isn't it? Perhaps it would help if you could explain how you're going to fix the problem. Well, we want more young British people to train as HGV drivers, to recognise that it's an excellent job with a bright future, until they're all replaced by self-driving trucks in about 5 years or so. But you can't train new drivers overnight. I mean, we're making the new test so simple, basically anyone could pass it. Is that safe? Sacrifices may have to be made. What about allowing more foreign drivers into the UK? The British people voted to reduce immigration, and that's what we're delivering. At least someone's delivering something. Oh, hang on. Apparently we are now letting in more foreign drivers. That sounds like a U-turn, which is one manoeuvre you won't have to learn. And it's not just petrol that's a problem. Turkey farmers have said there won't be enough for people this Christmas. Well, everyone's basically vegan these days, aren't they? Even some vegetables are in short supply. Foraging is good for the soul. You'll never appreciate a meal more than one you find in a bin. But look, if things get really bad, we're ready to call in the army. To do what? I don't know, drone strike a few petrol stations? That'll stop people queuing. Anyway, must dash. I've just remembered my wife's Beamer's only got half a tank and I need to fill it up before she leaves for yoga. Thank you, Minister.
We saw before, but it's good to see again.
26.
So we have to get to Boris Johnson. I'm afraid Boris Johnson has to make an appearance at some stage. So I wanted to show you this video from Channel 4 News, where I have to say Gary Gibbon from Channel 4 News is great at holding Boris Johnson to account, because many people in the media are afraid to ask Boris Johnson difficult questions. Now, Nick Ferrari will ask Boris Johnson some difficult questions, but nothing that really challenges him. Makes him feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it doesn't really get to the core of the problem that Boris Johnson represents.
16, you said to voters in front of that bus, there would be control of immigration, and you would talk to industry about what they need. How's that going?
Well, that's exactly what we're doing.
But you're not listening.
But you're not listening.
Well,
I love Gary Gibbon. He lays out the question perfectly, and then he allows Boris Johnson to make a fool of himself. No, you didn't listen to industry. Industry actually asked you, we need visas. We need as many drivers as possible. We need to bring people in from abroad. And your response, Boris Johnson and the other Brexiteers and the Tories, were, no, we're not. We're going to employ British people to do the work. And you banged on about that for months, and now you did a U-turn where, okay, yeah, we're going to bring people in from abroad. And that didn't go very well. But you're still trying to grasp on, you're trying to hold on to something that you knew was a pile of crap in the first place. This idea that we don't need to rely on foreigners. We don't need to bring in people from abroad. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. What is your prediction for the next general election? Do you think the Tories will win again with all the current drama? I think it depends, DC. I think it depends on when the election is. The further out, the better. The worse it will be for the Tories, because Brexit is not going to get better anytime soon. And the sooner it impacts ordinary people, and the longer it impacts ordinary people, it's going to damage the Tories. Now, the Tories can do two things to mitigate that. They can get rid of Johnson and replace him with someone else, and then blame all the problems on Johnson and say, look, Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister, is much better. He didn't go along with Boris Johnson. He was the lone voice in the room saying, Boris Johnson, this is not a good idea. That's what they do. Once Boris Johnson is out, he becomes the scapegoat. And they distance themselves from him. Now, that hasn't happened yet. It may happen sometime soon. It may not happen at all. But at the moment, Boris Johnson isn't taking a lot of... his support hasn't been really dented that much. And the Tories, while in some polls they're down, other polls they're up. They are generally down. They're still in a safe position. If there was a general election held tomorrow, the Tories would still hold on with about a 20 or 30 seat majority. They would take a massive hit. They would lose a lot of seats, but they would still have a majority. So the Tories would like to hold an election pretty soon. Phil, from a different bias, I think he was saying even this year could be possible, or maybe sometime early next year. I think the same. I think as soon as they can, they will have an election. And they're already in election mode. It seems like they're, talking up about, we're increasing wages, and that's the important one. Boris Johnson recently said, who cares about cancer outcomes, or who cares about waiting lists, or who cares about anything else? Think about wages or life expectancy. Who cares about life expectancy? Think about wages. And I think that's him in election mode. So unfortunately, if you were to ask me to make a prediction, Boris, the Tories are going to remain in power at the next election, unless the next election is some years away, and then there's a risk that the Tories would lose enough support. There would be enough of a swing, but it would require the Labour Party forming some sort of coalition, even a strong coalition with some of the main parties in England, or some sort of light coalition with the SNP as well. But it's definitely some sort of coalition. The Labour Party don't have the mathematics on their side to win a majority. You would need some sort of I don't even think it's possible, because they're not fielding enough. They wouldn't be fielding enough candidates. And also the Labour Party are in financial difficulties at the moment, which an election is not good for them at the moment either. They would prefer an election later on. Ben, thanks so much for that super chat as well. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone's other super chat. Okay.
Well, we're certainly listening and helping. Look, Gary, I've always been somebody who champions immigration. I'm a product of immigration myself. I think that it's a good thing for the country to be open to.
But you were saying that we don't want to bring in drivers from abroad. We want to train British drivers. So how can you say I'm pro-immigration if you're also saying, yeah, we want to stop bringing in drivers from abroad? We want to train our own ones.
High skilled people who want to come and do.
But we have a crisis
do a great
at
job.
the moment, and a shortage.
Those are your words, okay?
We certainly have labour.
We have a crisis. Those are your words. He's living on another planet. Of course, Boris Johnson is not affected by this. Boris Johnson doesn't put petrol in his own car. He's driven around in a Jaguar or in a Range Rover provided by the government. So Boris Johnson doesn't understand what it means to put petrol in your car, or buy food, or go to the supermarket, because these are things that other people do for him. He's completely protected. He's basically, Kim Jong-un with a worse hairstyle.
Labour shortages. I think you'd have to sign up to those words.
Okay, and what I would say is that is a function of the UK economy and the global economy coming back rapidly from the COVID lockdowns and sucking in demand of all kinds. And that, yes, is indeed producing stresses and strains.
But we knew about this. We knew this was coming. And
what what we're doing is talking to business, as you say, about their issues.
Unfortunately, Gavin, he did ask the question, but Boris Johnson ignored it, where he said, you knew this was coming. And Boris Johnson can't answer that, because he knows that if he says, yes, we knew it was coming, then why didn't you plan for it? If he says, we didn't know it was coming, then how did you not know it was coming? Are you incompetent? You were told these things were coming. So you either didn't know, which is strange, because people were predicting these problems because of Brexit. Many people were saying these things are going to happen, and your response was that's scaremongering. So they were right and you were wrong, but Boris Johnson can't admit that he was wrong. So he ignores the question.
But ultimately, We've got fantastic supply chains, fantastic logistics operations in this country.
Let's get to
talk to people like, listen to people like Morrison's. I've got every confidence
Business
that we
spoke
will
to
sort
you
this out.
at length, to the government at length, sending in letters in the summer. You know about all these contacts. You've probably heard about them now. Nothing happened. They told you there was a crisis coming down the tracks towards you on labour shortages in all sorts of sectors.
So
what did you do?
What you've got is a situation in which there's certainly demand for all sorts of sectors to bring in mass immigration again. And actually, I don't think that is the right approach. So
you just said at the beginning of this interview that you're not anti-immigration, and now you're saying bringing in immigrants is the wrong approach. So which is it, Boris Johnson? Johan, thanks so much for that super chat. This is a donation for a comb to Boris. I think his head should be shaved. Then we wouldn't have to look at his messed up hair. Of course, he does this in order to act like a buffoon and to get away with talking absolute twaddle. Thanks so much for that super chat, Johan.
We certainly offered some...
This is controlled immigration. This is what you talked about in 2016. That's what they're asking for. It's controlled immigration.
It's what we're doing.
To help out with certain issues.
It's what we're doing, and I totally
You're
support.
not doing...
This is what we're doing. You are asked to bring in people from abroad using some sort of... Well, they didn't explicitly say visas. They said add drivers to the shortage occupation list, which is a controlled form of immigration. Now, Boris Johnson said they wanted uncontrolled immigration. No, they didn't. You're lying once again. I know it's pointless pointing out Boris Johnson's lies, but I think it's important to know when he's lying, and, well, he's always lying. It's not when he's not lying, but when he's avoiding the question and when he's lying. These are Boris Johnson's only two modes. Avoid the question or lie about it. Ben, thanks so much for that super chat. With Sunak and Johnson pretty much saying... pretty much saving Project Fear was actually the plan all along. Then can they really believe what the Tories say anymore? Yeah, they went from saying there will be no problems to the problems are not Brexit to yeah, we knew these problems all along. We expected this to happen. So remember, the Tories started off by saying everything is going to be fine. Anyone who says that there would be shortages, for example, is engaging in Project Fear, is scaremongering. Then the shortages arrived, and the response was, no, this is nothing to do with Brexit. Then we said, yeah, but it's not happening in other countries. And they continue to say, no, it's nothing to do with Brexit, nothing to do with Brexit. And then they couldn't lie anymore, so they had to say, yes, it is to do with Brexit, but we knew about this. We knew this was going to happen. You knew because the Remainers were telling you it was going to happen.
Anything like,
of course we are.
There are 1,000th of the number of haulage visas that seem to have been approved at the moment, or compared to how many they think they need.
Well, actually, the reality is that we've approved the at least 5,000 people to come in. They haven't been able to produce more than about 127 people that they actually want to come in.
We've approved 5,000. It's like saying, I believe I have £1 million in my bank account. I've allowed the bank to accumulate £1 million in my bank account. Now, not that there isn't £1 million in the bank account, but I've allowed the bank to accumulate £1 million. So there's a stopgap, okay? When it arrives at £1 million, then we have to stop. But I'm allowing the bank to build up funds for me of £1 million. Okay. So we're allowing 5,000 people in. How many did you get? 27. Although Boris Johnson, even here, has to lie. He has to lie and say 127. Like, he couldn't just say, yeah, 27, and leave it at that. No, he had to lie here. His own department said 27. Like, just take a moment to think about this. Boris Johnson is lying about something that is an absolute embarrassment to him. Like, if you're going to lie, why didn't you say, no, there were about 2,000 or 3,000? We didn't arrive at the 5,000, but we got to 3,000. But then he can't say that because he'd be challenged on that. But he can say 127 instead of 27. Oh, my God.
Whose names they can identify. And that is a function of the shortage in the overall profession around the world, particularly acute particularly acute in the UK. And that is caused by persistent low pay and chronic underinvestment in plant, equipment, in automation.
Then why did you not do it? Okay, let's say, for example, Boris Johnson is telling the truth. I know it's impossible, but let's say, for example, Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers are telling the truth. And the reason the UK is suffering this shortage in heavy goods vehicle drivers is because, it's been a problem for years. Then what is your excuse for not doing anything about it until now? Why did you ignore the problem? Is it because the haulage industry didn't say anything, which is false? The haulage industry have been talking about this for years. They've been saying, yeah, we have a chronic shortage. So why didn't you do anything about it?
And in basic facilities that make these jobs attractive. So road haulage is a classic example, which you've mentioned a few times. The problem with road haulage is that when it comes to the life of a trucker, it's not what it could be.
And you've talked about that
in terms of pay, in terms of the facilities.
But your suggestion now is that their pay should go up.
And what needs to happen? What needs to happen is investment in skills, investment in people.
We've
and
all heard what you said.
investment
You said
in
pay
equipment.
should go up, and pay is going to go up, is what you said, because that's going to be the way the market works in haulage.
Yeah, because if you look at
Because
what I said in 2016.
Can I just finish this
Can
question?
I tell you what else I said in 2016 in front of that bus? Because you went straight to that point. And this was the moment when I remember the other side of the argument.
He's talking about the bus.
Started to panic because they knew I was right. What I pointed out was that pay for the majority of people had been flat, frozen, and was not going up at all, whereas pay for those in the executive groups, high pay groups, were seeing big increases, and nobody else was. And that was because of the model that we have in this country. And what I'm saying to you.
So all I remember on the bus was vote leave, 360 million pounds for the NHS. I don't remember anything about paying people more wages. Now, the problem with Boris Johnson's argument here is that, what it's going to do is it's going to drive up the wages of lorry drivers. Yay, that's great. Okay, what about people who work in healthcare? What about people who work in hospitality? Is it going to drive up their wages too? What about people picking fruit? Is it going to drive up their wages too? So people picking tomatoes or picking strawberries are going to be paid like £25 an hour. What do you think that's going to do to the price of strawberries?
Is that model has got to be behind us now.
It was 2016, that referendum. Where's your plan? You said there'll be a big adjustment. Where's your plan? We are facing all sorts of shortages at the moment. You know about the pig farmers up here. We could name any number of sectors, hospitality amongst them. All sorts of sectors.
There is no alternative.
Where's the plan?
The plan, the super deduction, for investment in plant and capital, the lifetime skills guarantee to help people train up.
We're talking about shortages now in all sorts of sectors.
So Boris Johnson's response is, we have a shortage now. We have a plan that will resolve this problem in 5 to 10 years, which probably will not, but he's selling it as a solution to a long-term solution. But there's a short-term shortage. There's an immediate, not short-term, immediate shortage. And his response is, we're going to do stuff in the future.
Investments in
you didn't make a plan, did you?
Of course we did.
They've been telling you about these shortages.
Boris Johnson doesn't have a plan. Boris Johnson wakes up in the morning and goes, okay, what can I sell the public today? Higher wages, less immigrants, fewer immigrants, more drivers, cheaper petrol, more petrol, some petrol. That's his. Every day he wakes up and he thinks, okay, this is what way can I distract the public? What way can I distract them from the problems that we're causing them?
Strategies coming down the track.
Sorry.
You say it was a big
Sorry,
adjustment.
no, sorry.
It was always in your mind about Brexit. The economy was going to adjust, but you haven't got a plan. You haven't done anything about it, which is why we've got these problems in front of us.
Sorry, what is necessary now is for the whole economy to realise, for everybody, all business, all of industry, to realise that we can't go back to a broken model.
So what he's trying to say is that things used to be working in a particular way. They were working. We broke it, and now we're going in another direction. And, you can either adjust or be left behind. But when we were going to break the model with Brexit, we told everyone everything's going to be great. No one will be left behind. Everyone is going to benefit. Now you're saying, well, a lot of people are not going to benefit and they're going to be left behind. Those who can adjust, they will succeed. Survival of the fittest. But he didn't sell it as survival of the fittest back in 2016. He sold it as cakeism.
In which we mainline...
You haven't built the new one.
Which we mainline low-wage immigration. Fantastic hard-working people came...
Low-wage immigration. We're going to get rid of low-wage immigration. So who is going to pick the strawberries, Boris Johnson? Who is going to work in the factories? Who is going to work in hospitality? You're going to drive up all of these people's wages? Are they all going to earn 20, 30, 40 pounds an hour? Is that sustainable in your eyes? Of course, he doesn't understand what the hell he's talking about.
Very largely from, but not exclusively by any means.
Sorry to interrupt again, but he's doing it because he knows it will sell to the public. We're going to raise, back to cakeism again. We can have our cake and eat it too. Everyone can have a wonderful salary. There we go. Boris Johnson is promising everyone a wonderful salary. Vote for Boris Johnson because he's going to sell you. He's going to sell you the wonderful job. Everyone's going to have a wonderful job. Everyone's going to have days off. They're going to have a wonderful, comfortable chair to sit in. They're going to have friendly colleagues. You're going to have public transport will be one. You won't even need public. You'll be chauffeur driven to your place of work.
It's from European Union accession countries, and that was terrific. But it led to certain consequences. We've got chronic low productivity, Gary, in this country.
But you talk to anyone in business, and they say the solution of turning around and giving someone more pay when you haven't sorted out productivity creates inflation and all sorts of other problems. They can't believe you're uttering those things as a Conservative Prime Minister.
And he's right. You have to, if productivity is low and you increase people's wages, productivity does not increase, and you just have more money, and it causes inflation. More people, it's in a sense, it's like the reverse of a UBI. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat, Max. I think you should publish some such segments as separate videos without the commentary, perhaps. Okay, I will do that.
There is no alternative. We have to see, in a famous phrase,
pay goes up without productivity.
There has to be more investment in people, and there has to be more investment in capital and plant and in productivity, and that's why we've put in all the measures that we have. And by the way, if you talk about long-term cost of living and the burden on people and the stresses and strains ahead, that's why we put in a massive plan, the biggest ever, or biggest for the last 100 years, to invest in our infrastructure, to make sure that we invest in our. So look at the package of people's costs every week. What are people? They're spending on housing, they're spending on energy, they're spending on transport, they're spending on childcare. Those are and food. Those are the in rough order. Those are the things that people are spending their money on. Now we can abate all those costs if we invest now in the things that will make a big difference. Housing, it is disgraceful. The proportion of people's budgets now go on housing.
Yes.
But your party has been in power since 2010. You can't complain about what people are suffering at the moment. Who was responsible for that?
That's
Because of chronic failure.
Can I just
Because of
make a
chronic
point here?
failure to fix
Because there's
the
a
housing market.
Fire hydrant of words coming up with that. These are long-term solutions which you are putting out there to a short-term problem. What have you done to address the short-term problem? You could do both in parallel. You could say to the company, to the
But that's exactly what we're doing.
No,
Gary, that's exactly what we're doing.
To the businesses that are
let me
saying, we
finish.
want extra people in to help with this year's crisis, you could say, yes, we'll do that. That's controlled migration. You're not saying that.
We are saying that.
No,
Sorry,
you're not allowing anything like the numbers they say. And can I just say that there is a very strong suspicion that the reason you're doing that is because you're trying to weaponise this whole issue over visas and the idea of immigration coming back in the numbers that it used to. You spotted Keir Starmer talking about 100,000 visas, and suddenly you want you spotted a political opportunity to weaponise the whole thing. An awful lot of people.
You're talking complete. No, he's telling the truth. Of course, this immigration is an issue that the Tories use at every election. Brexit was about controlling immigration. The Tories, of course, will use immigration. Priti Patel is rolled out to talk about immigration on a weekly, monthly basis. Every time Mr. Dog, it's just waffle, a bunch of phrases strung together. Yes, I think we've had enough of Boris Johnson for a bit. So I want to let's move on. We're almost at the end of the stream. I wanted to talk about this. 5 arrests. Thanks so much for that, FSM. 5 arrested after Iain Duncan Smith hit on head with traffic cone. This is terrible. Do not laugh. This is terrible. 5 people and look. Let me add a caveat. Okay, this does not help the situation. We understand what Iain Duncan Smith is. He's like Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, horrible, disgusting individuals who I would like to see voted out. This is the solution, not to hit them with traffic cones, but I understand people's frustrations. This is the guy who, he is the architect of universal credit. He is the architect of people's suffering. Hitting him with traffic cones, while understandable, is not a solution. The best solution is to remove him from power, to vote him out. And I don't know who the hell votes for this guy. You know, there can't be that many Tory donors. But anyway, it says here 5 people have been arrested after Iain Duncan Smith was allegedly hit on the head with a traffic cone during the Conservative Party conference. Greater Manchester Police said it arrested 3 men and 2 women after 5 people. How big was this cone? After reports that the former Tory party leader was pursued and attacked at around 4 p.m. on Monday. Duncan Smith claimed he was pursued while walking to a Brexit talk on the fringes of the party conference in Manchester. He was believed to be walking to the Markel Manchester Piccadilly Hotel, where he was due to give a talk with the Brexit Minister, Lord David Frost. Duncan Smith told the Spectator magazine, I can't tell you very much other than they just followed us, used abusive language, attacked us, and used a cone. I have to say it would have been very nearly have done for assault myself. I turned after them, and they sort of backed off, and I dropped the cone. Really? So he was on his own, or maybe with one other person, it seems. Where he was because he says we, so I think it was with someone. But were these people afraid of Duncan Smith? They were shouting all along, and then they smashed the cone on the back of my head. And so I turned and grabbed the cone and looked at them, and I took a pace forward and towards them, and they backed off. A video posted on Twitter said to be filmed after the cone incident showed Iain Duncan Smith being followed down the street by someone shouting "Tory scum" to the bang of a drum. Okay. Duncan Smith added, I threw the cone on the ground, said pathetic, and turned and walked off. They were incoherent, they were stupid. A friend of Duncan Smith told PA Media that he was walking with his wife Betsy at the time and escaped without injury. Greater Manchester Police said officers were at the scene on Portland Street within 3 minutes Wow, very quick. After receiving reports of an assault and that those arrested remained in custody. I do hope that the cone didn't suffer any injuries. Matthew, thanks so much for that super chat. Even the conservative CCP hate this guy, just another Tory not living in the real world. Yes. Is Iain Duncan Smith the parliamentarian who put in an expense claim for a pair of Y-fronts? Probably. Hard man Iain Duncan Smith. I'm Duncan Smith. That's not even his real name. His name is not Iain Duncan Smith. I think it was Ian Smith or something. But he wanted to sound cooler having a middle name. They took him to A&E where he had his jam mopped up by a doctor. Greater Manchester Police 80,000 unrecorded crimes. But this one was recorded. Okay, before we finish, just want to talk about one more story here. It says about Brexit in response in respect to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which I'm concerned about because Lord Frost seems to be undermining it at every turn. So UK promises robust reaction if EU starts trade war over Northern Ireland. Brexit minister says he expects Brussels' response to UK demand to renegotiate protocol within 10 days. So he's saying to the European Union, you have 10 days to come back and renegotiate the protocol. And the European Union said, we're not renegotiating the protocol. You agreed to it. You need to offer us something better if you want to renegotiate it. The UK will react in a robust manner if the EU launches a retaliatory trade war in the event of the Brexit talks in Northern Ireland breaking down, the government has warned. Robust in what way? The Brexit Minister David Frost said he expected the EU to issue a formal response to the UK's response for a renegotiation of the Northern Ireland Protocol within the next 10 days, as he outlined fresh detail of the timeline for talks. It means a November crunch time for the Democratic Unionist Party, which on Monday repeated its threat to quit the Northern Ireland's power-sharing administration and force fresh Stormont elections. Its substantial progress on ditching the protocol is not made. Now, a problem here for the DUP is that the DUP are not very popular at the moment in Northern Ireland. And if the DUP call elections, they're likely to lose them. And it's likely that protocol parties that want to maintain the protocol, will win a majority. And worse than that maybe for Sinn Féin, for the DUP, is that Sinn Féin could become the biggest party, and if they're the biggest party, they would have the position of First Minister. So the DUP would be allowing the protocol parties to win a majority, and they would allow Sinn Féin for the first time to have the position of First Minister. So not a very good move by the DUP. Bogdan, thanks so much for that super chat. UK reaction: we will double the number of UK flags. Every minister will not have one flag but two flags behind them during every interview. Lord Frost said he would then engage with the EU in an intensive manner for a short period before deciding, more than an hour? Before deciding whether to trigger Article 16, the mechanism to suspend parts of the protocol and enter a formal dispute. On the talks question, once again, I really wish a journalist would ask David Frost. And I tried to do this. So a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, I received an invite to take part in a discussion where Lord Frost was answering questions from the media and others, and I added myself to the list. Unfortunately, I wasn't given permission to ask a question, But I would have asked him the simple question, can you give us some examples of how you're not able to implement the protocol? So I'd love to know how is it impossible for you to implement the protocol? Johan, thanks so much for that super chat. Where is Chris Grayling? He can't do worse than Boris. Where is he? He's AWOL. He's disappeared. That's an interesting question. Yeah, where the hell is he? 20 likes to 500. Come on, folks. Smash that like button. Yes. Wow, we're up to almost 500 viewers. That's amazing. Thanks so much, guys. Lord Frost goes on this question of talks. So it must act quickly as possible. The team is ready to go to Brussels, he said. What, the team that negotiated the withdrawal agreement that you have a problem with? You're going to send those people again? We need a short and intensive negotiation. There is no negotiation. And when it's short, I mean weeks, 3 weeks. So he sent to the European Union, we want to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement that took months in 3 weeks. And we're probably going to arrive without any pen and paper like David Davis did. I personally believe that there comes a decision point probably around early November when we all know an agreement can be reached or cannot, and certain consequences flow from that. Speaking at the Centre for Brexit Policy event at the Conservative Party conference, why does the Labour Party not have a Centre for Brexit Policy? The Conservatives do, but the Labour Party don't. I remember the Conservatives said, get Brexit done. Okay. Frost also warned that there would be no agreement, that if no agreement could be reached, the UK would be robust if the EU retaliated by imposing tariffs or other barriers to trade between Great Britain and the EU. I'd love to know what this robustness means. Cahill, thanks so much for that super chat. Why would the EU further engage with Mr. Frost when he doesn't like his own deal? I can't answer that, Cahill. I have no idea why they would do that. Look, I think it's a case of Lord Frost is playing games here. The EU said you have to implement the protocol. I think this is another case of appearing tough and then just kicking the can down the road. I stick by what I said before, and I don't know if I'm right about this because I don't know what's happening behind closed doors here, but I still believe that what Boris Johnson and the Tories want to do is to kick this can, the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol, down the road long enough to where it gets to the stage where trade has pretty much dried up between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and is no longer necessary, or almost, there are very few checks being carried out because there's very little trade taking place, and there's very little disruption. Because it's very difficult if you're a Brexiteer in Northern Ireland now to sell getting rid of the protocol. Because if the people of Northern Ireland look across the sea and they see what's happening in Great Britain, empty supermarket shelves, farmers at the beginning of the stream, I talk about farmers killing their own pigs because they can't sell them to market. Because there are no trucks to pick them up. There are no butchers to slaughter them. This is something that the people of Northern Ireland want. Because if I was a Remainer or if I was pro-protocol in Northern Ireland, I would be telling the likes of DUP voters, if you get rid of the protocol, that's what you're going to have. Do you want that? Really? Let's park, belief in the union or maintaining the union for a moment. Let's be practical here. Is that what you want? Or do you want the protocol? So why would the EU further engage? They're not going to engage. I think they're just going to say to him, this is the situation. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors here. I think what's happening behind the scenes is the EU are saying to Lord Frost, you have to implement the protocol. He's probably saying, yeah, I know, but we're not going to do it. We just want to kick the can down the road. But to the public, we want to show that we're tough. And the EU don't care about that. because the EU know what the UK is going to do. Bogdan, thanks so much for that super chat. Did Frost succeed to negotiate anything yet? No. He keeps talking about negotiations, but there are no negotiations. And even if there were negotiations, you have to provide something better. But they haven't provided anything, and he hasn't provided anything better. Gary Trimble, thanks so much for that super chat. Bluff and bluster from Tory conference, Muppet Show, regarding Boris's reference to Kermit and Miss Piggy at UN conference. Yes. It's just about showing, it's just a bit of flag waving, really, where we care about crime when they don't really care about crime. We care about the union when they don't care about the union. We care about raising wages when they don't care about raising wages. We care about inflation when they don't care about inflation. Whatever they say they care about, they really don't. It's what happens behind the scenes. This is a means for donors to get access to politicians. It's a great way to raise money. Yeah, we're going to do everything we want, everything you want. Just give us money and we'll do it for you. That's what it's about. The conference is more about connections, making connections, networking, than actual policy, because there is no real policy anymore. We don't think retaliation makes any of those cases, those things any easier, he said, but if they did launch trade wars, which could include enforcement action in other parts of the Brexit deal, proportionality is important. Earlier on Monday, the leader of the DUP gave Boris Johnson until the end of October to solve the Northern Ireland Protocol row. Okay, just hours after the UK issued a veiled threat to the EU that it would pull the plug on the Brexit arrangements. At a private meeting with the Prime Minister in Manchester and later at the public event, isn't this weird? So Jeffrey Donaldson, the leader of the DUP, is meeting with the Prime Minister. Why? Why is the Prime Minister meeting with the DUP and not the head of the SDLP or people who are important, like business leaders? Anyway, at a private meeting with the Prime Minister in Manchester, he later said at the public event, Sir Jeffrey Donaldson warned that the party needed him to take action within weeks or he would force an election in Northern Ireland. Donaldson, however, said he was greatly encouraged by what Johnson had told him on Monday morning and hoped that significant progress could be. At what stage does Jeffrey Donaldson wake up and say, wait a minute, I think Boris Johnson is lying to me? He's told me so many times he's going to do this and then it falls through. Could it be that he's lying? Either Jeffrey Donaldson is naive or he's another liar as well. The DUP leader was speaking shortly after Frost said that Britain cannot wait forever for the EU to respond to its demands to rewrite the Brexit. No, the EU has already responded and said we're not going to renegotiate. That's it. In a speech to the conference, Frost said that he had been waiting since July for a formal request for substantial changes to the protocol, which the UK has largely suspended over objections to checks on a range of goods, including sausages. I think this is just saber-rattling. I think it's just an attempt to play to the crowd. In reality, something else is happening behind the scenes. I think it's a case of kicking the can and allowing Northern Ireland to realign. And what I point to as evidence for this, or not really evidence, but something parallel to this, is how the UK government treated businesses at the beginning of the year. Business, look, we can't export. We need to do something. And the UK government said to them, just set up in the EU. There, that's the problem. That's your problem solved. We're not going to help you. Sort it out yourself. And I think this is going to be the same for Northern Ireland. Businesses are having trouble importing goods from Great Britain. The Tory government response is sort it out yourself. And they have sorted it out themselves. They sourced goods from other parts of Ireland or the EU. They've sorted out the problem. That's the Tory response to everything. And you can apply this to the heavy goods vehicle driver shortage. What was the Tory response to that? Your problem, sort it out yourself. Find drivers from the UK. Now they've introduced the visa, but that was because of pressure. But generally, the response from the Tories is, "We're not going to help you. Fix it yourself." Trying to bring some drivers to the UK, paperwork hell. Thanks for that, Bogdan. I know, Bogdan, you're involved in that industry, so I've heard that it's an absolute disaster, and then there's also the problem. I think that many of the drivers who would want to come to the UK don't have passports. 83% of drivers used their ID card. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that they didn't have a passport, but how many have applied for passports since May? I don't know. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks, we got up to over 500 viewers. That's amazing. Smash that like button. Thanks so much for that. I want to say a special thanks, of course, to everyone who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated as always. And of course, a massive thank you to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Just wanted, before we finish, we have our one for the road. So I want to say thanks to everyone once again for helping the channel reach 80,000 subscribers. It's a milestone I never thought it would achieve, and I hope to maintain your support on that, and I hope to eventually get to 100,000 sometime next year. That would be greatly appreciated. Bogdan, again, thanks so much for that. From What Business is Saying, by now Boris's dangly bits must be raw. P.S. New visa system is a joke. 3 months. Good luck with that. Yeah. I know that he's received a lot of strong language, we could say, from industries, a number of industries. A lot of them have been saying, we need driver, we need people, we need staff. We're on our knees here. You're the gatekeeper. We can't just bring people in. We can't, you're expecting us to fix the problems ourselves. We used to do that. But you are the gatekeeper here. We want to bring people in from abroad because we can't get them here. If you run a business and you're in a little village and you need, a web designer, and you look in the local area and there's no web designers, what do? You expand. You look in the further afield. And in the same, when it comes to most industries, if you can't find people nearby, you have to look further afield, look further out. And when it came to many of these jobs, many of the people who came from abroad already had experience. They knew they had done that work before. They had become extremely proficient in it, so that they were the right candidates, and they knew what it took. They knew that it was necessary to put in long hours, but they understood the reward at the end of that, and they were willing to make the sacrifices necessary in order to do that type of work. These people are not that easy to find. It used to be easier to find because you were able to search in a much bigger pool. Now the pool has gone much, much smaller. We've seen it at the beginning of the year where there was a farmer who put out a request for received 40,000 job applications, and then eventually hired 2 people. 2 people turned up, and then one of them was hired. Like, they needed something like 100 people, but they couldn't get the people they needed because many people didn't want. When they found out how much it paid or what the work involved, they didn't want to do it. Anyway, before we finish, yes, thanks so much for that super chat, Bogdan. So let's have our one for the road.
The Brexit-hating global elite is watching Britain's chaos with glee. When my friend Nigel went to 7 petrol stations, no fuel in any of them, and then got hit by a van, the vicious Ramona elite loved it. Because, it was because of Brexit apparently. Well, the joke's on you because it wasn't because of Brexit. He got hit by a van because people don't like him. Look, Brexit was a declaration of war on the global establishment. So, of course, Britain has been held to a higher standard than other, more, I'm afraid, wimpy and compliant countries. They're sort of like those dogs that the slightest provocation roll over and expose their disgusting little tummies. We're not a dog, we're a lion. And the only way we're going to be exposing our tummy to anyone is to spray them with our glorious British fleas. The media elite magnify all of our problems. The fuel crisis, food shortages, those little fishies that just need to be taught to swim in the right bit. And they blame them on Brexit. It's Brexit shaming. Pure and simple. This Brexiphobia must end. When it comes to the end of free movement, there are some naysayers who are like, oh, it's shrunk the domestic labour market, creating severe shortages. Hello? There is no appetite for freedom of movement on either side of the debate. We don't need freedom to move. We just need a healthy dose of a little thing called patriotism. If it wasn't for all these wokies turning the country against Winston Churchill and senior members of the royal family, we would have noble British workers queuing up for the chance to serve Queen and country, to spend 13 hours a day defecating in plastic bags. And the thing is, as good patriotic Brexiteers, they will understand that you can't put a price on freedom, which means, dare I say it, that we could actually lower the minimum wage. And they can have that, just like the undocumented cleaner Jonathan and I used to have. As for these van people, what is so bad about 3-month visas? They get to come over here, experience global Britain, and 3 major festivals: Bonfire Night, Halloween, and our family's favourite, International Men's Day. Oh, I wish it could be International Men's Day every day. And then we send them back in time for Christmas. And if they don't get back in time, they can do that strange shit in a ditch game they did last year. Lorry drivers will be lorry drivers.
For those who don't understand sarcasm, it has a very good dose of sarcasm there. So guys, I want to say thanks so much to everyone who came on tonight. I'll see you all on Friday, same bat time, same bat channel, 8 p.m. British summertime, or Greenwich Mean Time at this stage. Summer is over. So have a great week, guys. Take care. Remember, as Boris Johnson always says, stay alert. Once again, massive thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks to all that sent a super chat, greatly appreciated. And thanks to the moderators for doing a great job. And I see someone wrote, Nigel Farage was hit. His car was hit by a Renault van. Oh. Good night, guys. See you soon. Take care.